What do you think of when you think of a hotel? Do you think of a very, very cheap building that's been rapidly constructed to accommodate as many people as possible and turn a profit in a short period of time? In the past, we have gargantuan hotels with very elaborate and detailed architecture integrated within the structures. What's the reason for this? Join me today as we explore the account and the wonders of the Hotel Tartaria. We begin by looking in Canada, the Windsor Hotel, built 1875 to 1878 and destroyed in 1957 in Montreal. And as we gaze upon this very incredible and remarkable edifice, we have to recall the interesting history of the city of Montreal. We haven't directly explored the cities of Canada, but we'll get into that very soon. I wanted to start, though, with these great, grand railway hotels. And it seems as though adjectives just simply don't do them justice. I find it a real travesty that this structure is not still with us, although the annex that was built later is still utilized for business and corporate meetings. We can see that this was once a very impressive structure. Intricate columns and detailing in the ceiling, something giving this building more of a feeling of a palace that we'd expect to see somewhere perhaps in France or Germany, or one of the other supposed older European nations. Looking at structures like this, though, you always see the detailing, the unique dome, the decorations and pediments on the top of the middle of the structure. And even looking at the city of Montreal at the time, seeing other intricate structures that may be smaller in scale but impressive nonetheless. This is all that remains of this once great hotel after it was demolished. No doubt part of the urban renewal that struck Canada much as it did in the United States. At least we have something that reflects back to the old hotel. But does it really capture its glory? Was it really part of the original structure? When we look at these older photos, we see such an impressive detail with this interior dome and incredible columns with artistic detail that was focused on. Now just imagine someone constructing this in Canada, or really anywhere, in the 1880s or the 1890s, or any time frame. How exactly did they do it? Why aren't we building hotels like this today? And when you look closely at this incredible and dramatic structure that's no longer with us, you'll still see the same signs, the same symbols that we've encountered in numerous other structures. Now, what was the original purpose of this structure if this is indeed not a hotel? What could it have been used for? Why is it that we have these elaborate and intricate hotels from the past? And of course, with this incredible structure in Montreal, we have the same account of numerous fires. Yes, when we look at the exterior and interior photos that we have to wonder why such a structure was so susceptible to fire. Is it, as the many commenters tell me, that these buildings were integrated with wood? Does it look like there's really any wood in this particular interior of this very grand dining room? And once again, another dome structure within it. And did it really look like there was any wood that was integrated into the walls? It's quite a mystery to me that these structures were always susceptible to fire. Let's go to Banff Springs Hotel in Banff, Alberta, built 1886 to 1888. Quite a dramatic structure, out really in the middle of the mountains, quite isolated. Now, why is it that someone would build a structure like this? Well, once again, officially, the explanation is this was part of the railroad. And as a result of the railroad, you need an incredible structure that also has a very wide gate and underpass as part of the original structure, so you could ride numerous horse-driven carts under it before you checked in. We'll be informed that this is the chateau style that was popular amongst the great rail hotels of Canada at the time, but I find this to be one of the most dramatic structures, given its impressive isolation. Most of the other hotels that we look at tend to be in great cities, and yet here in the mountains, we see an impressive hotel. What could it have originally been built for? Why is it that we see these intricate symbols that seem to have more meanings than initially meet the eye? And isn't this an impressive interior? And not to say that I'm denigrating any of our modern hotels, but even if you stay in the very finest hotels that have been constructed in the last 10 years, would you ever expect a lobby or an entryway such as this? You certainly wouldn't see a symbol like this, exactly whatever this represents, and perhaps someone from the area or in Canada could tell us exactly what it represents. You see almost a different form of architecture, and I'll admit every time I see the interior of structures like these, I'm always reminded of the many science fiction and fantasy movies I watched throughout my life, showing elaborate interiors that seem like they're from another world and another time. There's also older images of this impressive Banff Springs hotel from the distant past, where we really get an idea of just how truly isolated it was. Now, we could certainly understand and agree with the explanations, perhaps, of how it was constructed during the time that it was stated to have been constructed, but how much effort would it have really taken? And I'll pose that usual question to all watching and all viewers to comment on accordingly. Do you think someone could build a structure like this today? And it doesn't even have to be as isolated as this particular structure is. It could be in a great city, or anywhere where the modern implements of infrastructure could easily reach. How exactly was this constructed? Now, there are some far-flung construction images, apparently, of some of these structures, but it's the usual problem. The explicit detail is missing, the chronological detail is missing, and it doesn't fully answer our questions, unless we're willing to make compromises with many of these images. Perhaps this is actually an image that shows the, how shall we say, discovery of the building. I'm being facetious, of course, but an image such as this, just imagine two individuals riding their horses, and they come out of a clearing and they just see this structure, with smoke coming out of it. Clearly an indication that it's occupied, but who would it have been occupied here in my little fantasy setting? It is rather odd, though, when you look at an image like this, your imagination can run wild. A very elaborate and amazing castle structure, a chateau, isolated in Canada, and just randomly found by some explorers. Even the pool is impressive, and again, going back to that earlier comparison, is this the kind of pool you'd expect to see in your current hotels that have been built for the past 10 years? I don't have to name any of the hotel companies or corporations, you know which ones they are. Would you see a pool like this with these impressive pillars? It should be noted that Queen Elizabeth II and King George VI visited this edifice, and here they are with some random individual enjoying the impressive views. How intriguing that one of their stops during their visit in Canada involved seeing this incredible, wondrous hotel. I would certainly want it on my agenda if I was traveling through Canada, just because of the fact that it's dramatic in its isolation, yet its construction is no less impressive. What's the real account for it? Was it really just people and horses and carts that came off the railway and built everything in a very short amount of time? Were they cruising around in the incredible jalopy cars that were widely available? And remember where those cars were actually originally constructed. And that's how we account for the construction of this elaborate and dramatic structure. But even with all of our heavy machinery available today, heavy equipment, transport, and trailers, would it be possible to build a structure such as this? And here in the many different images, you can just see how dramatic it is to this day. The way that this impressive castle, this fortress, this chateau, contrasts with the natural environment around it. Looking at other images of the interior, we can certainly see that there has been some modifications and some renovations over time. And yet, even where it seems as though those signs are present, it, in my humble opinion, still vastly exceeds many of the more modern hotels that have been built within the last 10 to 20 years that one would be expected to stay in. And looking at this incredible terrain that this hotel sits within, we have to wonder, how exactly was it done when it was originally constructed? And if possible that this building once had a different origin and an entirely different purpose, then what was that purpose? Was this some kind of survival compound at the end of another civilization? When I look at this particular image, for some reason I'm given the Zardoz vibes. We have the old world in the background, and then the rather new, more modern structure in front. And it certainly reminds me of that film in a variety of ways. What is the real origin, though, behind this structure? Is it really just simply a hotel isolated in the mountains that was pulled off with a lot of focused construction and the hard labor of the many stonemasons and specialists that were available in vast quantity? Or is there a completely different explanation for it? And now we go to the Chateau Frontenac in Quebec City, Quebec. And once again, we have another intriguing construction story on a very short timeline. Why is it we were always able to build these incredible structures? And it doesn't matter where, in the United States, Canada, or other places that we've looked at. And it should be noted that Quebec City has quite an impressive old world skyline to it. Certainly a place that warrants an on-site exploration to really see how all these structures actually fit together. And the Chateau Frontenac is no exception. And it's certainly been explored by other explorers, but perhaps what I find most impressive about it is the intricate detail and the arrangement of the numerous different structures. You might be thinking, well, it makes perfect sense. This was inspired by the chateaus in France, and that would be our mainstream explanation for how such a structure was possible. And yet you may notice there's details on both the exterior and the interior that seem to defy that initial expectation and understanding that this was simply inspired by other architecture. There's something about it that seems quite original, quite specified for the area that it was in. Is it possible then that this structure is a unique form of architecture? And when you look at all the detailing with the roof and the numerous towers, and even the incredible arrangement of the colors within the types of bricks or blocks that were used in its construction, how exactly was this incredible structure constructed? Even looking more closely at the roof and the incredible sloping angle and the beauty and the contrast of it, in comparison with the skyline of Quebec City, you could see why this is such a dramatic and amazing edifice. How exactly was this done? Has this roof ever actually been renovated? Of course, we're informed that it has been, because every old world building needs to be renovated. I'll give Canada credit, though, at least instead of using scaffolding, they actually cover it with some nice long banners, which looks a little more, we'll just say, presentable. But then the other interesting thing with this impressive Chateau Frontenac is this intricate wall. Now, while this may not be the Great Retaining Wall that we looked at in Dubuque, Iowa, it is a very impressive and what looks to be almost a foundational wall. What's really under this structure? What efforts did they go to really establish the foundation behind it? And how long did the construction take? Is it really along the timelines that we understand for these impressive hotels? Or was there a completely different construction timeline that perhaps we don't understand? Maybe they really did do it in a short amount of time. Perhaps it was built for some other purpose, and compared to the other architectural capabilities at the time, that the advancements exceeded what our expectations would be. Looking at the entryway here, and once again we have another very wide tunnel entryway to access the hotel, we'll see similar symbols that we've seen on other structures. Even though this is Canada and most of those other structures that we've looked at have been in the United States, it's no less dramatic. And I know I could fit my truck and horse trailer in there very, very easily. As though someone knew that there was going to be many vehicles going through that particular entryway. As with any true old world structure, we can see the multiple different colorings that come with different types of lighting. And there's no shortage of spires and other dramatic features that dot this impressive chateau. Although you really want to call it a chateau, or perhaps palace might be a more comparable term to what we've seen. And I have to say, after exploring many of the incredible palaces across the land, the Chateau Frontenac in Quebec City does compare. And certainly it would not be inappropriate to call it a palace. Yet, looking at some of the older images, we have other interesting anomalies. Almost a wooden boardwalk, and the Chateau Frontenac, despite being recently constructed, almost looks a little dirty or covered with dust. And I know there'll be the usual explanations. They were burning coal to stay warm, and there was just simply a lot of dust in the air. Yet the interior is no less intricate and incredible than any royal palace that we've looked at, whether it's in Caserta or Buckingham, or even the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, Russia. We see comparable decorations and intricacies. We even see the same arrangement in many ways of the galleries and the access to the very impressive and dramatic beauty that this Chateau of Frontenac offers. And it's one of the reasons why I believe it is important to look at both the interior as well as the exterior of these old world structures. The Royal Alexandra Hotel in Winnipeg, Manitoba, built in 1906 and demolished in the 1970s. No doubt part of that urban renewal. Now, is it really the Royal Alexandra Hotel? There's other indications that it's the Royal Alexandria Hotel. It's integrated with the train station at the time, and we'll take a look at it, but apparently this was supposed to be a structure that was going to be built in that chateau style. But in the early 1900s, Canada was trying to get away from that, at least here in Winnipeg. That's the official explanation we'll get for why this doesn't look like the other chateau hotels. Yet when you look at the train station over here, you'll see that it definitely conforms to where we've seen other train stations with impressive and detailed architecture. The interior, though, of this impressive hotel once again matches the interior of the other hotels. Numerous large columns supporting a well-decorated ceiling. And once again, I believe it's a tragedy that this structure was torn down, because it seems like it's a structure that would endure for a long period of time, representing a completely different era of opulence or comfort, or perhaps something that was more focused on the well-being of the individual. And I know the response to it will be, all these hotels were simply for the most wealthy of that particular society. That's the official explanation. And maybe that is an acceptable official explanation. But one thing I find quite fascinating is if you take all the hotels, all the dwellings, all the houses from the Gilded Age, all the millionaires' rows, whether we're in the United States, anywhere in Europe, or anywhere else, and it seems as though there were many more wealthy people that were around from 1890 to 1920 to actually account for this. There was another little bit of a movement that occurred, especially in the United States, called the Progressive Movement that we're going to be exploring when we look at the Reset Barons later this week. But what's the real story behind this particular hotel? Is this a remnant structure? Why is it so opulent and impressive on the inside if it was supposed to be a change in terms of architectural expression at that time? Is it possible that it was yet another structure that was repurposed or changed from what its original intention was? Quite fascinating that there is this kind of opulence in the hotels and even in the train station with incredible columns and numerous symbols and different colored bricks and blocks out in front of it. Quite an impressive arrangement. Royal Alexandra Hotel and Station. Always off the Canadian Pacific Railway, because it was very important that every continent rapidly have their railway. And the United States, Canada, and even Australia seem to have no challenges constructing these railways. Looking at some of these rooms, though, once again, we seem to look back into a completely different civilization. If it is the same civilization, then society really changed that much in that period of time? Does it really seem like society's changing that much now? Or have things really changed that much in just the last 50 years, if you've experienced it? And I wanted to look at this Royal Alexandria Hospital, apparently located nearby, and why there seems to be that confusion with the name of Alexandra or Alexandria. Quite an impressive structure for a hospital. We look a little bit more closely and we see some of the impressive architecture. And we'll look at the Royal York in Toronto, Ontario, built 1927 to 1929. I suppose you could say this is Canada's Art Deco hotel in Toronto, and it is still standing, so you can still visit it to this day. But when you look a little closer, you'll see there is some corresponding detail that we have with some of the other chateau structures, and even some of the detailing, such as in the windows in varied places such as Rochester, Minnesota, and numerous theaters that were also built across the United States in the 1920s officially. So is this merely saying that these buildings were all built at the same time in the Roaring '20s, or is there a different explanation? Because when you look closer, you'll see that the symbols on this structure are symbols that we've seen elsewhere. The cartouche, the flower, the griffin. And if you look hard enough, you'll see examples of all these overlapping symbols. It's impressive to think that such a structure was built anywhere in 1927 to 1929 in a very short amount of time. Officially, it's a hotel, but is that originally what the structure was? If it was still a time of capitalism, then wouldn't the most effective way would be to cheaply and quickly construct something? Nobody could effectively and cheaply construct something like this today. We do have this construction photo that shows the older forms of cranes. There's no heavy machinery that we'd expect to see in the 1920s. And it seems to conform to the construction style of the 1890s, with blocks just simply being laid nearby, and not a person present in the construction image. Perhaps the camera was just simply not fast enough to cover or to capture the people that were moving all over the construction site. And so this Royal York Hotel endures to this day, and by all means, visit it, explore it. See exactly how it compares with the surrounding skyline of Toronto. Why is it that this building, despite being constructed in 1927 to 1929, has so much character, and in my opinion is much more impressive than the taller structures around it that are very box and glass-like? Again, that's just my opinion. What exactly is the account, though, with these construction photos? A construction photo like this would certainly be enough to assuage someone's curiosity or provide an explanation, and maybe it does. But whenever you look closer and you see some of the details, in my mind, it oftentimes creates more questions than answers. For example, in this particular image, where we see how the Royal York compares with the skyline of Toronto. And despite just being very recently constructed, estimating this image from the 1930s, the Royal York looks like it's been around for decades, or much longer. I'm being very generous with decades. But what's the true account? Is it another story of coal? And this particular structure was also visited by Queen Elizabeth II. And it looks like she's keeping a weather eye out for Frank Drebin after her encounter with him in her visit to Los Angeles several decades before. And of course, I'm referring to the real Frank Drebin, a guy who bears a striking resemblance to Leslie Nielsen. And once again, the interior of this impressive hotel, matching the great interiors that we've seen in other great rail stations across the land. And we're informed that there were additions that were constructed with the wood. But what about the pillars? What about the balconies and even the great chandeliers? And this particular structure will show you exactly what to expect from a hotel built in Canada in the 1950s and onward. Ah, yes, this one's actually called the Queen Elizabeth, and it certainly looks like 1950s architecture, everything we come to expect. But this nearby structure, though, definitely has potential as an old world presence. Now, please continue with me as we look at some other Hotel Tartarias. What is your current view of a hotel? You've certainly stayed in hotels. Many of us have many times through our lives, and oftentimes, whether it's in the conduct of work or personal business or travel, we're in some sort of unique and very, very interesting hotel. But what do we really think of hotels these days? What do they really represent? And why is it that if we look at hotels in the past, we tend to see something just a little different? So I want you to keep that thought in your mind as we go through this exploration, because while we typically focus on government buildings, churches, mosques, other religious edifices, all other kinds of buildings of priority, we tend not to look at hotels. And yet hotels provide another one of those very essential clues that we have to understanding and being aware of the old world. You could also say it's some very definitive evidence. So keep that in mind as we go forward. And for the first part of our exploration, we're going to be zeroing in on Atlantic City. And this first image that you're looking at here is none other than the wondrous Atlantic City. Now, you might be surprised to know that Atlantic City in New Jersey, no, I can't do the accent at all. I'm obviously not from the East Coast. I'm sure you could figure that out. I might be from the UK, but that's okay. We don't need to talk about that now. But when you look in the details on many of these images from Atlantic City, you do see these very impressive edifices. You would think, if you aren't familiar with Atlantic City, that this is some sort of incredible government building. Maybe it's some sort of wondrous monument that was built to the wonders of Art Deco. You certainly wouldn't think it was a hotel if you didn't know anything about it. But what's rather odd about Atlantic City is the fact that it is a city that didn't really grow up until after the United States Civil War. Yes, on the Atlantic coast, we would expect this to be an early settlement from the 1700s or even earlier, but the official history tells us that this incredible resort didn't start development until the 1870s, when they go so far as to tell us that there were 500,000 people going there by rail every single year. It just always seemed to be so easy to travel and accomplish many other things in the past, especially in the 1800s, but we've already talked about that ad nauseum. When you look at some of these images, though, of course, you'll see this very intriguing composition, this amalgamation of very well-dressed people, and then these very impressively constructed structures. And yes, we'll be looking at some of these in very definitive detail. And you can see what Atlantic City has come to now. Yes, here we have one of our modern buildings, and you can see how it compares with what we had in the past. Of course, I could say it's taller, and it was constructed for a cheaper price, although that's not necessarily true either now, is it? But this is what we tend to have in Atlantic City now. And so again, compare and contrast this older view that we have at Atlantic City in New Jersey from the past to the modern view. Oh yes, isn't this lovely? And for those of you who are familiar with Las Vegas, the wondrous city that they built in the middle of the desert in Nevada, all the different ways there are to say it and mispronounce it and annoy people that are from there, although who's really from Nevada anymore? There are some nice people there, don't take me wrong, but it's just interesting to think of all the different pronunciations that we have. And here you have another one of these very impressive skyscrapers. So a very nondescript building. I mean, you could say, though, that the imagery is very impressive. It's like looking in a mirror. So make of it what you will. But this isn't Las Vegas. This is Atlantic City today. But you compare and contrast it with some of the older structures that we have. And oddly enough, this just being a resort town that didn't really come up until after 1875, we do find some rather puzzling structures. We have these castle sorts of structures that were also hotels, I suppose. Not exactly sure why we have that, but that seems to be what we do have. And here you have it, the Dennis Hotel, the Marlborough Blindheim Hotel that we'll be taking a close look at. Now, of course, this is the postcard, and you might be asking, well, it's just a postcard. Do you have something a little bit better than that? Yes, we do have something better than that. But this gives you an idea of some of the structures that were present in Atlantic City. Now, is the official historical account of Atlantic City accurate? Are parts of it accurate? Who really knows for sure? Welcome to come to separate conclusions on this. What interests me, though, is that we have all of these very impressive buildings in a very, very small proximity. And that's probably the first interesting detail that really stands out to us about Atlantic City. And yet you can see in this particular postcard, here we actually have two of our main hotels that we're going to be looking at. We won't be looking at the Dennis Hotel, but we will be looking at the Marlborough Blindheim Hotel. Marlborough, of course, being an interesting name with a lot of connotations to it. We won't talk about Winston Churchill at all, at least not in this exploration. And then we've got the Traymore Hotel over here. And the Traymore Hotel is the hotel that appeared on the thumbnail. Yes, a very impressive edifice. Multiple domes, multiple obelisks, all other sorts of details on here that you can't even begin to imagine would be in hotels nowadays. I mean, just take a look at your Hilton Garden Inn or any one of our other modern hotels and how we build them. Of course, they're all functional. I know. Even Four Seasons is built to be functional. But here you actually have a little bit of an image that shows you that these buildings were very real in Atlantic City. Now, what really to make of Atlantic City? Is it some sort of remaining settlement, or was it something that was designed to survive the reset, or for that matter, was it even a settlement that actually survived the reset unscathed? And therefore, people had to actually take the effort to repopulate it at some point in time. Not really sure, just suggesting other possibilities for it. And so that's why Atlantic City is very intriguing. And interestingly enough, both of these hotels that we're going to be looking at did survive into the 1970s. So we do have some colored photography. And again, the images that are not so questionable. So it does seem clear that these structures did in fact really exist, and The Marlborough, when we talk about it, yes, it was demolished in the late 1970s, and there is some very interesting, dramatic footage of its demolishment. You can even find it still on various YouTube news feeds to this day, fascinatingly. But you look at some of these other old images in Atlantic City, and wherever they're posing here, when you look in the details behind the images, you get the impression, though, of a lot of old world structures. Again, with that detail, and who knows what the exact construction material is on a lot of these. And looking at any image from Atlantic City from the early 1900s all the way through the 1930s, you'll get the same impressions of that. Now, why did they just suddenly decide to sink a lot of money in there? Are we really trying to shoot up the official historical narrative? I don't feel we need to devote time for that in Atlantic City. The whole fact that this settlement just developed in the 1870s and came up after that, I don't really feel that's worth our efforts because we've got some real doozies in this. And here you can actually see the images that give you the idea of just how impressive this architecture is. Now, even taking the, yeah, KC-933 looks flammable. That's a good one. And yes, but strangely enough, both of these buildings were constructed to be fireproof. No, not that film with Kirk Cameron, but actually fireproof. At least that's what they inform us. And oddly enough, we're actually looking at one of the largest, in fact, the largest reinforced concrete building in the world, because, what else would it be? So moving on past these images, though, and looking at the colored images, it is very dramatic because you can see some interesting, I don't want to use this term wrong, but maybe I should say variance in the architecture. But then, oddly enough, there does seem to be some similarities. And what you'll find is that a lot of these structures were constructed in a similar amount of time. Now, here's something else that's very interesting with Atlantic City. This is the official city coat of arms. And again, this isn't exactly the things that we'd expect to see when we look at New Jersey now, is it? We do see some familiar symbols. Now, I'm not sure what to make of this. I mean, is this something that is a remnant from the distant past, or is this just something that was inspired by it and then was augmented or altered? See, that's the other challenge that we have, is that there's been a lot of renovation, a lot of reconstruction, a lot of remodeling. At least we forget urban renewal and the various incarnations of that. So how this image has changed, what it really represents, can't say for sure, but there are some very interesting depictions. I mean, look at this. Here we have the Staff of Power with wings on it, and then the snakeheads meeting. Now, of course, I'm not going to say what symbol we tend to associate that with today, because remember, symbols can have different meanings associated with them. But I certainly wouldn't expect these very intriguingly dressed individuals to represent New Jersey in any sort of way. What's even going on with the haircuts? I mean, they're certainly not doing the latest remake of Clash of the Titans with the next version of the Perseus haircut, since we had Harry Hamlin's big tuft of hair from the 80s, and then we had, what's that guy's name from the remake that I can't stand, who had it cut in a very military cut. But maybe this will be for the next remake. I can't really say for sure, though, about the city saying down here at the bottom. Was this something that was added later, or was this part of the original coat of arms? It's just one of those interesting little details to take a look at and ask some questions about. Sure, maybe the good people of Atlantic City decided to put together some very unique coat of arms that completely defies all expectations and standards of what we'd associate with the United States in the early 1900s or the late 1800s. I'm sure that's possible. I mean, we've got all sorts of images of people going around in robes and togas and fancy hairdos from that time frame, don't we? I mean, really, we don't, but, we can just say it. But there were other hotels that were quite intriguing, and all we really have, in addition to limited photography, is some of the postcards that just give us an idea of just how grand and ornate a lot of these structures really were, and what they may have been representing. The hotel was there before New Jersey became a state. Probably right, Kathy. It's safe to say a lot of those structures were. But do we know for sure? We can say that we don't, but looking at some of the others, and here you can actually see this particular building, and this is the Claridge Hotel, and for the longest time, this was the tallest structure in Atlantic City, at least until the late 1970s, early 1980s. Good 4 decades. Quite impressive. And again, it has some of the attributes that we have come to associate with old world buildings. Now, has it been altered over the years? Has there been some changes with it? Yes, possibly. but it's still pretty impressive. Now, obviously, we can see down here towards the ground floors, yes, it's been modernized or renovated or however you want to say it. But it is an example. Now, don't worry, I'm not here to depress you tonight. There is actually an example of a hotel that you can go to and visit in person to this day and interface with it and really have an authentic old world experience. No, it's not in Atlantic City, but we're going to be getting to it. So, this is just giving us an idea of some of the beauties that we have there. Ah, yes. And here we have an example of our 1980s architecture in Atlantic City. Beautiful modernity. Same. But then compare and contrast that here with the old Atlantic City, the Hotel Windsor, an image attributed to 1911. And of course, we have our castle appearance. We have our smokestacks. But then in great disparity to what we see on the roads and the infrastructure capabilities at the time. I know. People just worked really hard. There were no labor laws and there was infinite money available. It was the early 1900s. I've got it. We didn't have the Federal Reserve, which was the very definition of infinite money. But we don't need to go into that tonight. And here we have it, the Marlborough Blenheim Hotel. And we'll be looking at both the Marlborough and the Traymore in explicit detail. But the interesting detail about this particular hotel, and we'll look very, very closely. Let's just go ahead and dive in. What do we have here? Now, this was constructed in 1906 and torn down in the late 1970s. But what do these symbols really mean? And when you even try to look up what architectural style this is, you'll get the usual, well, it's, and I'll say the hand wave answer. It's Spanish and it's Moorish, so which is which? I don't know. They kind of blend together. But you look carefully at the details on this, and since when did we associate interesting dragons and serpents? Now, this isn't exactly the best image. I've got a better image where you can see some of the details a little bit better. But it is very dramatic to actually see the structure in its original coloring, because that's what we tend to lose when we look at the black and white photos. And what other details do we have in it? Have we seen some of these symbols before that we have on this structure? What do they really represent? What's with these two impressive obelisks anyway in this dome? And what are your thoughts just looking at this? Yes. Founded. No doubt about it. Yeah, I'm with you, Lori. I wish we could see all these in person too, because, there's a lot that we've missed out on. But like I've said, I'm saving the best for last because it does still exist and we can still see the best for last. No, it's not in Atlantic City, but yeah, as Nana says, it's a castle. I mean, how do you really define this? How do you explain something like this being in Atlantic City, a resort town that was purpose-built as a hotel? This doesn't make any sense. I mean, while those buildings might not have been so aesthetically pleasing from the 1980s, it at least makes sense, especially from the capitalist mentality, to build a structure like this. How exactly does one attribute this kind of building to any kind of economic system? Really, I could argue this building doesn't make any sense in a capitalist system any more than it makes any sense in a communist system and everything else in between and everything beyond it. Any form of currency can't really explain this. I mean, we say we can. We've got the money. We can do anything. We've got the money now to do anything. Lack of money never stopped a war. But then you look and see what we have today. Yes, the Ocean Casino Resort. And this does make sense from that perspective. Of course, we're just trying to maximize occupancy. And we make the structure appear aesthetic by having it blend into the sky. Well, that makes sense. It's just a giant mirror. Hope you don't park your car somewhere where that mirror fries your car, like we saw in that one building a couple explorations ago. But then we also have some other legitimate old world structures that have been repurposed or have been altered over time. And that's where the account tends to be obfuscated. So it's almost as though if there were structures that could be renovated to where we should say that the old world signs could very, very carefully be muted over time, I'll use that word because that's probably the best word to use, then they were allowed to survive. But the structures that they couldn't do that on, such as the Hotel Traymore here, well, it wasn't getting past the 1970s. Because how exactly do you explain a structure like this from 1906, when it was originally constructed, and trying to pass that off to the people today? Yes, we could build a hotel like this in 1906, but, we can't build a hotel like this now. It's just not economically prudent, or whatever other list of reasons that we have now. So, what do you really make of it, though, when you see a structure like this? And this is probably one of the most dramatic structures that was in Atlantic City, although, a good argument could be made that Marlboro Blindheim, being the largest reinforced concrete building in the world when it was constructed, maybe it's just as dramatic, if not more dramatic. But, it comes down to actually trying to decide which one is more aesthetically pleasing. And sometimes it's not really that easy, is it? Yeah, Heidi says it really well. Unexplainable. Unexplainable from both a mainstream historical perspective and an alternate historical perspective. Yes, I'm going to admit it. And Robert says it very well. Magnificent. And then Vaughn says, Vaughn. We can't even build them when we try to these days. No, and nobody's even trying to, really. I mean, there are some efforts to try to replicate this architecture in place, and we'll probably do an exploration on those efforts. And I will admit some are a little more successful than others. But when you've done this long enough and you actually look at these things, it becomes very, very easy to determine the difference. And so, let us begin by taking a closer look at the Hotel Traymore. But let me make sure I don't have any more images from Atlantic City. Yes, we do have some others. The Chalfonte Hotel. And here you can sort of see something that looks to be a little bit in between, So could this have been a structure from a different time in the previous civilization? Could this have been a reset purpose-built structure? Who knows for sure? I mean, it's hard to tell. And then looking at the original imagery of the Marlboro Blindheim Hotel. All right, I'm getting impatient. Let's just dive right on into it because this is too good not to see. And I know you want to see the interiors of these, and guess what? I'm like a little kid in the candy store right now, so we'll start by looking at the Traymore. And yes, I was able to locate some good interior images, so you will not be disappointed. So, the Traymore Hotel, constructed in 1906 and torn down in 1972. And let me make sure that you've got a good view of this. Let's get a little closer. Now, we don't have maybe I should say it this way. We don't have the same fidelity in the detail of the image that we'd like, but even at a distance, you can get an idea for the opulence of this very impressive structure. You can see details from this distance. Now, I'm not exactly sure how far away this image was when it was taken, but we get an idea for the mass of this structure. And yet, despite this being built in 1906, we can see some architectural detailings on it, and they don't even really give you an architectural style when you look up the history of this building. Nobody even bothers. I mean, why would they? Because it kind of looks a little like what they would attribute to Art Deco later. I'm not saying that's what it is, and that's not what they tell us it is. It just kind of looks like that to me, to my objective eyes. I mean, we've got these two very impressive domes up top. We've got this other subsidiary dome over here. And then you've got what looks to be a giant smokestack. Now, what was the original purpose behind this building? I don't know. Was this some sort of unique reset structure? Hard to say. Yeah, as Carol says right there, not enough people to even use it. And, when you actually look at the occupancy, how many rooms they had in these structures, does that make any sense? So that's why I'm a little torn on the speculation in terms of what its original purpose was. Was it some sort of reset compound, a purpose-built structure that was able to survive difficult times? Or was it actually a structure that was from the high period of the previous civilization? Both are very distinct possibilities. But you look at some of the other images with it, and you can see the image from it, and right next to it you had the Marlboro Blindheim Hotel, and yet it wasn't quite as large. Now let's go to the interiors. And keep in mind that a lot of these images were snapped from the 1920s to 1940s. I don't know for sure. And there's also accounts that there was a fire in these structures, that they were renovated over periods of time. So are we looking at the structure in its original grandeur? Hard to say. But when we look closely, we can see there is some detailing here on these columns and these pillars. And then we can again see that we have the very impressive elevators. But this is just our first interior look. And yet, looking at some of the other patios, you can see that there seem to be a lot more available to this. Now, what was the actual construction material? It's really, really hard to say. And yeah, the real tragedy is we can't analyze it because this building's no longer with us. It was torn down. And why was it torn down? Very, very good question. Now, here you can actually see it in all its glory with the other structures. And very, very impressive in Atlantic City. I mean, all of these structures just seem to defy what we'd expect to see in the 1900s, before the Great Depression, before there were No jobs available because the economy wasn't growing, but there were structures that were still being built. This is an interesting one over here. Almost see some little columns there. But again, you can see that the Traymore is by far and away what appears to be the largest overall structure. Now, granted, that may just be to the naked eye. The other interesting thing is when you look and you see that it appears to be a brick structure closer to it. But here's the problem, and I'll acknowledge this to everybody. No, I can't even attribute these images actually being in or along the Traymore Hotel. It's been gone for a long time, well over 50 years. So even believing that the structure existed, and hold on a second, let me reference for you the films that you can see the structure in its full glory before it was torn down. You can actually see the Traymore Hotel in the film The King of Marvin Gardens. It was shot in Atlantic City. And I think that was a Jack Nicholson piece, if memory serves. Yeah, Jack Nicholson, Bruce Dern, Ellen Burstyn. Wow, that's going back in the day. Scatman Crothers, 1972. So The King of Marvin Gardens, if you really want to see the Traymore and actually see what it looks like in a film and some other images of it when it was still in existence, watch The King of Marvin Gardens. Because films inadvertently do capture some details from these structures. Now look at this. And looking at this patio, this eating area, you kind of get an idea of some of the opulence with this. And again, you see some of the unique brick arrangements or block arrangements. I mean, who knows if this was originally brick or not. But just so interesting that all this trouble, all these resources to build these impressive hotels, and they didn't even designate them historical areas. They just tore them down as fast as they could. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Very beautiful. And good call out there, Opie. No patrons whatsoever. Megyn Kelly went there. What, Atlantic City? Yeah, I think I recall that. But then even here at this desk, and you can get an idea of some of the detailing here and some of the beauty within the interior architecture. I mean, look at some of these devices here on the pillars. And even look at this old light set here. I mean, if that is what it was, an original light set, I mean, is the light coming from the base there? Very intriguing. Very unique design and a lot of effort that went into it. And of course, I don't want to ignore the floor. What was the floor made out of? Something that we think of as granite, marble, or something even more. It's just interesting to look at this. And then you also look at the main reception area, and very odd. These are almost like giant torches almost. I mean, giant fire pits. Very unique. And again, I have to question what exactly is missing because it feels like, now I don't know for sure. This is just my intuition here. But we get the impression that there's a lot that's missing even from these images. It almost seems like a lot of decorations were removed. And if you recall some of those explorations we've done, namely the state capitals, I'll just highlight, the Iowa State Capitol, where we saw devices that were removed from banisters, from walls. You get the same impression with this hotel. I mean, look at this floor. You can get the idea that there was a lot more decorative detailing in it, and some of it is still there. But the feeling is that a lot of it's been removed. I mean, what was actually on these columns, these pillars, whatever you want to call them? Very, very interesting. And what about the ceiling? And then, of course, you see other images like this, and here you do see some more of the detailing is still present. So it's as though there were different stages, as though the building was slowly eroded over time, or muted, so they could gradually take away the opulence and then give the usual series of reasons. So, and thank you for that, Robert, and welcome to the new members, and thank you for joining us. But that's what's really intriguing to me, because I think you see this with the Hotel Traymore here from 1906 to 1972, where this building was slowly muted. RB, how many people did they need to clean and staff that kind of place? Great question. Probably as many people as it takes to clean and staff an aircraft carrier, a couple thousand, maybe more. How many could they actually fit in there? That's another good question. Good point, RB, and good to see you tonight. Now, I like this image because here you get an idea that the structure is much, much older than we could begin to imagine. Now, yeah, I know it's not exactly the best colored photograph, and, there's strange things going on in the lighting, but you can almost see some strange erosion, some marks of degradation. Now, the structure didn't even last to be 70 years old. They tore it down before it was even 70 years old. Very, very odd. And yet the unique architecture here by each of these domes. I mean, there's something that's almost just decorative beyond our ability and magnificent, almost in a way that matches the Hagia Sophia, I dare say. I mean, I'm really struggling to find any kind of comparison because this hotel is so unique. Indeed, that being what it was. And then here in this little bar room, again, you had that same impression that there were a lot of things that were removed or that it was just sort of muted to make it a little bit more plain. But we can still see some of the geometry and the geometrical precision on the interior of the structure. It's just a hotel. Why do you need to bother with this? This is one of those things that just doesn't add up. And then even in some of these reception rooms, you can still see some of the remnants when you look in the detail. You have to look closely, but it's still there. So it's as though they didn't get around to removing all of the decoration, just a lot of it, to mute it a little bit over time. And that seems to be the tragedy for a lot of these structures. Now, here's the other issue that we have. Because we have limited images available, don't even get me started on the lack of availability of construction images, and even if we had them, no reason to even go there. But what are we not seeing from this hotel? What's truly been lost to time? What incredible interfaces do we have? What does it really look like underneath these domes that we can't see? What's it look like on the interior? Or if you're standing up here near, is this a smokestack? Is this something else? Everything about the structure is very, very unique, and it just really stands out. And I'd like to thank Paul for sending this to me. Paul, if you're listening, I do really appreciate it because I'd intended to get to Atlantic City not so soon after Coney Island, and yet the story behind Atlantic City is very similar to Coney Island. It's really, really strange. So that's the Hotel Traymore. What are your thoughts on that one? Yeah, Carol says it right here. Remove the decorations and remove the healing properties of the building. No doubt about it. You remove the aesthetic, and what about the acoustic properties of the building? That's the other thing that gets really, really odd about it. Hey, there you are, Paul. Yeah, I appreciate it. And thank you again for sending this image and recommending it. I'd completely forgotten about this. So thank you for saving my work on it. I do appreciate it. Yeah, and as Kathy says right here, attention to detail. And that's what you get in a lot of these structures. So anyway, that's the Hotel Traymore. And by all means, do some research. Maybe there are still some images out there. Now, of course, we have to subject them to scrutiny because now that we're looking for images, suddenly images become available. Are they authentic or are they not? I'm not sure. As RB says, I wish my hotel was that nice. You and me both, RB. Yeah, and I usually shoot for Hilton Garden Inn. And while it's nice, it's certainly nothing quite like this. But, that's just me. And no, that's not a plug for Hilton Garden Inn. Just because I know that I can count on their breakfast. Okay, so let's move on to the Marlborough Blindheim Hotel. Now, as I recall, I know pretty certain John Levi had covered this one before in one of his explorations quite a while back. So, the Marlborough Blindheim. Let me make sure you can see that. All right, we're good on the imagery. And by the way, as we go on through the exploration, please be sure you hit that like button and support the channel. And let's deep dive into the Marlborough Blindheim. Now, oddly enough, this was also constructed in 1906. So, two impressive, visually unique hotels that were constructed in the same year. Now, they even have the temerity to say, or maybe I should say audacity, that it was constructed, topped out in 1906, and then opened in 1906. And then this one was torn down in 1978. Now, what we do have that we didn't have with a colorized image is some of the decorations on the wings. We'll get to that in a second. What I want to focus on, though, is in this image, you can actually see this very unique motif of serpents, dragons. What exactly is this? Here you can clearly see it's a dragon. Very, very interesting symbolism on this structure. Yeah, exactly. Looks like it's missing a few minarets. And maybe, but what we tend not to see on minarets or with that Spanish Moorish architecture are dragons, serpent creatures, or whatever you want to call these. So very, very hard to know exactly what to make out of it. And that's why I wanted to spend a little time looking at some of this detail. Because you look over here, and again, you see some of these serpent dragon motifs on this. And what exactly are these domes? But then again, is this that pine cone device? Yet there seems to be faces on it. So very, very strange. Why do you need all this on a hotel? I don't know. Looking at one of the obelisks or pylons or whatever you want to call it. And oddly enough, it looks like some sort of crab, but it could be something else. And yet, a very unique symbol right above it. What exactly does that represent? I mean, none of these symbols represent anything that we associate with the United States or New Jersey in the early 1900s. None of them at all. Now, if you want to argue that point, be my guest. I'm always open to arguments. And yet, looking at the dome here, it looks like we've got these faces, these heads. Are these the lion heads? I can't quite tell. Maybe. That are up top here. But they all have such a unique appearance to them. And yet, this looks similar to that flower device that we've seen in other locations. I mean, or sunburst or whatever you want to call it. I mean, these symbols, I can't even describe them because I've got no frame of comparison on a lot of them. And usually we do have a frame of comparison or we've seen them before. And so when you see these kind of details, then suddenly it makes a lot more sense why they had to demolish this hotel. There is no explaining this. Yeah, we've got this hotel, and we've got some really unique crabs and symbols we can't explain. And, oh, by the way, don't pay any attention to the nasty faces or the dragons or the serpents all over the place. Yeah, not exactly sure what that's all about. And so that's on the main structure itself. I mean, there you can see it. Dragons, interlaced dragons. So was this some sort of warning? Was this from the time when things were falling apart? Was this a reset structure? Well, looking over here, you've got other interesting symbols. And again, we see this bountiful harvest, maybe. But how gorgeous and intricate with some of the other decorations on this. I mean, whatever this represents, whatever it really means, just the fact that this was done, whoever did this, whenever this was done, it's very, very impressive. And why wouldn't you go to all efforts to preserve this? Well, the historical account says because money was low, the place was falling apart in the 70s, and nobody wanted to put the effort into it anymore. It's just easier to build one of those big high-rise hotels and you'd make a bigger return on it. Well, I guess that makes the sense from the capitalist perspective. But you can see that this shell device is actually on all four sides of the structure, or whatever you want to call it. Shell, shield, acoustic device. I mean, I really don't know. I'm spitballing ideas here because this is just one of those structures that just completely defies anything. What do we got here? Is the crab building aligned with the Cancer constellation? That's a great question there, Intuitive Solution. I don't know. I'll have to look it up on the map and see if it indeed was. Might be something to that with the celestial alignments. So, Grand Society, yeah. Well, hey, it did survive the Grand Society of the 1960s. It just didn't survive the post-Grand Society of the 1970s. So, unfortunate. Anyway. So here's that colored image, and you'll notice that we don't really see the wings too well in this, but here you can get an idea. You can kind of see the dragons and the serpents, and I do appreciate the colored image because it gives you an idea of what the building really looks like in its full coloring. And that tends to be what we lose when we look at the structures in black and white photography. Of course, there's that argument. How long have we really had colored photography? How much did photography advance? Who really knows for sure? I mean, you got lots of people who think they know, and maybe they do. But what I find impressive on this is just how intricate some of this symbolism here is on these pylons or these obelisks. I mean, was this originally gold? Is this something that really, really shined? And you see these nasty little faces. Were these originally in gold or something even beyond gold? Now, this image is attributed to the early 1960s, 1962 from the archive. Again, I don't know for sure, but just very, very impressive. And we're just looking at the exterior of this very unique hotel. But then on the interior, it looks like we do have some devices that have survived. Now again, I wasn't there. I wasn't in the hotel before they tore it down. I didn't take these pictures myself. I don't know. But we have seen these images before from the Plummer Building in Rochester, and that structure is still standing. And, if you can talk to the right people, you might be able to get inside of it. So very, very interesting that there are these devices that are on the inside. But again, much like with the Hotel Traymore here in the Blindheim Marlborough, you can see it's kind of the same thing. You've got some signs of the decorative detailing, but yet this image seems to either wash it out or they've been removed. Not really sure. And I think that's really the tragedy behind it. Yeah, as Carol says, decorations are from the new owners of the building. Yeah, I think a lot of the new decorations may be, but I think we do have some decorations that are older that were either pulled out or, how shall we say, modified. So, hard to say. Yeah, Heidi, and I think that's more than a coincidence because you're talking a structure that's in Atlantic City, that was built in the very early 1900s, again, according to the official historical account. And then a structure in Rochester, Minnesota, the Mayo Clinic, that was built to be its main building sometime in the 1920s, although conflicting reports on that one as well. Let's take a look at some more that we have here in the Marlborough Blindheim. Now here in the ceiling, you can get an idea that some of the decorative details have survived for the time being. And again, asking that question, how exactly do you reconcile going to all this effort in what appears to just be a sunning room, just a nice little room where you sit and you look at the beach and the ocean? You have all this decoration. Why would anybody bother? I'm looking out the windows. Why would you bother, A, planning this, B, putting all the effort into constructing it, and then C, investing the capital in it when people are supposed to be looking at the windows and seeing the pretty ocean and the beach? Don't you find that just a little odd? Now, of course, then the question begs, okay, well, Mr. Smarty Pants, if someone did design this and build it like this, then why did they put these decorations in it? Was there some sort of function behind the artistic form of the decorations? And as we've theorized before, yes, it seems clear that there was. Was it acoustic? Was it part of the healing properties? And then when you look closer, you can see again that we've got decorated columns here. So not only do we have a very well decorated ceiling in this structure, that this image is not doing it justice, because I really wonder what this looked like in full color, we also have columns with decorations on them because, why not? You're going to invest in a nice ceiling, you may as well have nice columns too. I'm surprised we don't have lines and sculptures and all kinds of stuff all across the floor too. Who knows, maybe there were. But, I'm being a little facetious. But it gets to a point where you just see enough of this and you're just kind of losing your mind because you really can't explain it or justify it. So, now this is an image from when they were tearing it down. And remember, they were tearing it down in the late 70s, but for some reason, colored images are difficult to come by. I'm not sure why. But quite a tragedy. How difficult was it for them to tear this down? Hard to say. And yet some of the other interior images, here we can see that they were really pulling apart the building from the inside out. Now, was there a fire? Were there other issues for renovation? Not really sure, but in some of the images you can see there are some details that survive. You just have to look carefully and take a moment. Right here. What the heck is this? Well, clearly it's some kind of light system. I think I see light bulbs here, but was it something else originally? And what was actually going on here in this, what appears to be a ballroom of some sort? At least that's what we'd think of it as. And you can still see some of the decorations here on top of the pillars, but what was supposed to go in each of these circular areas here? Were they supposed to be windows? What was actually here in the middle of this open area and this circle in the middle? I don't know. Very, very odd. But then you see the music gallery here, and you've got what appears to be some sort of advanced form of technology. How else do you describe this? And so here in this image, it seems as though the technology, the architecture, and the detailing of the decorations were preserved in their full glory. So very interesting that it compares and contrasts with what we looked at earlier. Oh yeah. Hey, Creator's Life, thanks for joining us and welcome. Yeah, there you go. Electric current control. Who knows exactly what that technology is for? Is it something acoustic? Is it cymatic? Is it all the above? Is it more? Is it some sort of means of interfacing with the energy levels of people? Who knows? What you got there, Griff? Yeah, it does look like it'd be in a sci-fi movie, Maybe Ridley Scott should have scoped this building out for Blade Runner, but, it didn't survive when they started filming the original Blade Runner. And yet here in this other image, you can see that they did have something. We can't really make it out, though, because it's not the best image in that ballroom. What was actually in those circular areas, those impressions that go around the ceiling. So it's very, very odd. It's very peculiar that they're images that say different things. Marlborough Blindheim, above illustration shows but one section of this magnificent and sumptuously fitted house. Oh, they call it a house. That is what they call it, yeah. Great adjective there, by the way. The open-air plaza and enclosed solariums overlook the boardwalk. See, that's what we need in our hotels. We need more solariums. If we had more solariums, we'd actually be out there looking at things and we'd be talking to each other. Yeah, just a thought. The boardwalk and the ocean, the environment, convenience, and comforts of the Marlborough Blindheim, and the invigorating climate at Atlantic City make this the ideal place for winter and spring. And so, yes, once you have the trains taking everybody out there, I even like how they capture some of the detail on what's clearly the sketch here. Make sure you get the dragons on there. They need to see that there's dragons on the obelisks, the pylons. You know, the dragons are what finally sell it. But then you see images like this, and yet this is purported to be from the Marlborough Blindheim Hotel. And again, you can see some of the decorations. It's almost as though the photos have, I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to suggest that the photos were altered in some way. I mean, I don't have to suggest that. But for whatever reason, it almost feels as though they're intentionally of a poor quality, so you really can't get the detail that was actually in this building. You can get an idea of it. But you can't really appreciate how extensive it really was and how far it went. So, what you got there, Sean? New Jersey also did with the Prudential building. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's happened with no shortage of structures. It's just interesting to see in what we think of as hotels this happening. You know, all this effort going into these hotels. And here in this final image, you can see its unfortunate demolition when that time finally came. And yet, for whatever reason, there seems to be something different about the images when the demolition occurred. You know, now did they scrape the paint off? Did something change? Was there some sort of treatment that they did to the building to actually demolish it? Why, in fact, was this building demolished? When we look at our theories, you know, because we always had that theory. They demolish any old world building that could be demolished if the capability's there. Unless demolishing that building would affect something else that somebody doesn't want affected. But that apparently didn't seem to apply one way or the other to the Marlborough, and so down it went. And it's a great tragedy. And all we have left of the images, look at that radiator there, all we have left of the images, which give us the bare bones hint of what this structure really was in its glory. And again, we get the feeling that a lot's been removed. But yet there are some other images, and if you look hard, you can find them, and they're not easy to find. Portion of the concert exchange in the Marlborough. You can get an idea for just how beautiful and decorated and ornate the structure was during its glory. Now, the official historical account will compensate for this by telling us there were fires, it fell into disrepair, it had been around for a whole 50 years and was just starting to fall apart. You know, just like they tell us at the Iowa State Capitol, the cornerstone was so schlocky they had to replace it in about 3 years. And then they had to replace that cornerstone too. But none of it really adds up, though, when you actually look at images like this and you see something completely different than what we saw in all those other images. You see something that shows you how incredibly amazing and what kind of sense of beauty and grandeur this building had in its true heyday. Yeah, right there. Truth amongst the deception. It is a historical document. The structure surviving is a historical document. And like I said, believe it or not, there is one of these hotels that is fully preserved. And we're going to get to it, so make sure you watch to the end on this one. So anyway, that takes us through Atlantic City. We're now going to transition to take a look at the old Waldorf Astoria in New York City. Now, there is a current Waldorf Astoria in New York City, but we're not looking at that one. Now, if you viewed the channel for a little while or over a couple months, you'd be familiar to know, or you would realize that the Waldorf Astoria is the current location of the Empire State Building. And voila. And so another structure, the original Waldorf Astoria, built 1893. It was actually two separate hotels, amalgamated into one, and then torn down in 1929. Wait a minute, was it the Empire State Building or was it the Chrysler Building? Drawing a blank on that one. Well, in any event, they tore it down, but yeah, the name of itself, Astoria, so this is what it looked like. Pretty sure it was for the Empire State Building. I don't think it was for the Chrysler Building, but either way, they tore it down for a skyscraper, and you can see how impressive it was. Here's the interior. Ah, yes, just the kind of dining experience that we used to have. Look at this. So a structure that was only there for a couple decades, and they had this kind of beautiful detail on the inside of it, but they tore it down. They tore it down. Makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Now, keep in mind, we're not too far from Atlantic City here, but, you know, we're in New York City where anything's possible and anything can happen at any time, especially if we go off the official historical account. But let's take a look at some more of these images from this beauty. Now, this was the Waldorf, so keep in mind this was a separate hotel. I'm not even going to talk about the problems with this image, but yeah, apparently it existed on its own. Very unique, very incredible. Lots of little detailing here up on the roof where it's the hardest thing to do, but hey, it was the 1800s. It was easy to do then. But again, on some of these inside images, this is the Astor Gallery. Was Mrs. Astor safe in the Astor Gallery? Of course she was. Yeah, it's a joke from the Titanic, a bad joke. But then we see some of these familiar symbols on the inside here. Wonder what was pulled off of the ceiling, because the ceiling's awfully plain, but then they put all this effort into decorating everything from the walls. And then we have our favorite cartouche device appearing again in many different variations. So really we can see why this structure had to come down. I mean, what's going on over here? Hard to say. Boy, this would just be something incredible to walk through today. You know, and you might recall the explorations we did in Moscow and looking at the palace there and the Kremlin. I mean, this is really something that compares to the palaces that we see in Europe, but this isn't there anymore. We tore it down to build a modern skyscraper, or did we? Who knows for sure. Here's the Astoria main ballroom. Yeah, some of those details there, because how can you have a ballroom unless you fully decorate all the balconies? Because, you know, it's just the kind of stuff that you need, especially for a hotel that's only going to be there for a couple decades. Oh, look, another version of that cartouche. Everywhere you look, it's all over the place. But then looking at like the main foyer here. Oh yeah, that's something else we need in hotels again. We need our main foyers back. Just a big sitting area, but you have these gigantic columns. Again, all very well decorated. And you've got all this effort that went into this very elaborate and detailed ceiling. So once again, I know it doesn't make sense from either the capitalist, socialist, or any other economic perspective why anybody would do this. Nice light fixtures, too. Again, it's as though there were no limitation on the capabilities at the time. Even looking at the floor. Now, this is the main office. Oh, yeah, well, you need to have a very well-decorated main office. So your employees, who, as we understand it, were overworked, and, you know, everyone who built it was overworked, yet they put this kind of effort into this decorative detailing. Well, of course, it's because everybody was rich in the 1800s, especially everybody going to New York City. They just had so much money they didn't know what to do with it. I mean, look at this guy with his little mustache here. Yeah, and who knows what the actual construction materials of this building really were. But you look at some of the interiors and you get the idea of, again, what was lost over time. I mean, 1929, right before the Great Depression. And then, of course, they threw up the Chrysler Building and then the Empire State Building because it was just that easy. You know, here you can see in this gigantic banquet, and yet looking in the back, you can see some of the decorative detailings. And yet it's covered over here. Very, very odd. Well, you know, we had to decorate it. We had to put additional branches and leaves so people felt like they were in the outdoors, especially when they're dressed to the nines like they are here. Wonder how comfortable it was to actually sit there and endure a meal like this. I don't know. But then here in the Gentleman's Cafe in the Waldorf, I mean, look at this. In the ceiling, all this intricate detail. And what exactly is this symbol about back here? I mean, this is nothing that we'd associate with the United States and New York City in the 1870s, 1880s. I mean, if you want to get an idea of what mainstream history tells us, go back and watch that film, The Age of Innocence, with Daniel Day-Lewis. And believe me, it's always a pleasure to watch Daniel Day-Lewis. But watch that film and see how people were living in that time. And then try to reconcile with what mainstream history tells us through that film, those people constructing something like this, with all these decorations, all these incredible columns. I mean, it just completely blows the mind. Oh, there you go, Albie. Yeah, eyes wide shut. I get the feeling if this structure survived, and they would have filmed in the Waldorf Astoria as well. Why not? But remember, this is all just hotels. And I don't care if these are hotels for wealthy people. What, wealthy people just like to look at columns and beautiful decorations and not talk to each other about all their business plans? That's how you get wealthy, by not caring about money and just appreciating art all the time? Now, that is what they tell us, though, that wealthy people from this time frame all had great art collections, and that's what this was going towards. Okay, well, whoever owned this hotel, wouldn't you want to save this incredible fireplace? I mean, this would be a work of art that would endure to this day. No, it was just made out of some kind of cheap staff and stucco. Yeah, sure it was. I don't believe that for a second. And even when you look at some of the drawing rooms, and they call this the Henry IV drawing room, not sure why. And again, no detail spared. All the effort into building out all of these structures. So anywhere you stayed, the Myrtle Room, I guess this was one of the hotel rooms. Oh, there's their cartouche device. A couple different variations of it. Interesting. I mean, are these vents of some sort, or are these just decorations as well? Very, very intriguing. I mean, just the detail on this and the very subtle nuances of this particular room. You can't really justify this. And no one's building a hotel room like this today. Not even the world's first trillionaire is bothering building hotels like this today. Why would he? I mean, who could do it for starters? And again, it wouldn't be economically viable. You remember that guy from the film Falling Down? It's not economically viable. Here's the reading room. This is why we don't have people who like to read these days. We don't have nice reading rooms. So in our modern hotels, we need to restore our reading rooms. Or heck, if this is the room that you're going to go to and listen to your iPod. You hear what I just did there? Yeah, antiquated device. Excuse me. You got your iPhone or your laptop. Imagine sitting in a room like this. Imagine sitting in a room like this and actually listening to this live stream. Wouldn't that be something? You got the very well decorated balcony up here. I mean, really, this is just a hotel in New York City. How does this make any sense? I mean, do you not want people to ever leave the hotel? I would never want to leave the hotel. Oh, Vaughn. Looks like a grid. Yeah, it does look like a grid, doesn't it? The grid. Yeah, less said about that, the better right now. But time is a dimension. Yeah, that's a good way to say it, Sky Sage. Wonderful as always. Oh, yeah, there you go, Sean. Don't let me forget that. Multiple basement levels, yes. A lot of different dimensions to these structures. And here we've got this very, very interesting sketch, the two separate hotels before they were joined as one, the Waldorf and the Astoria. Yeah, okay. Were they actually joined in our time frame? Not really sure. But here we actually have the U.S. Senate committee hearing on the Titanic sinking. Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't the Titanic a British flagged ship? Wasn't it? Wasn't the White Star Line a British line? Why is the U.S. Senate having a hearing on it? Oh, because of John Jacob Astor. That probably had something to do with it. But hey, Mrs. Astor was safe. In fact, I'm sure this guy right here is the one that said that. Mrs. Astor is safe, and then everybody settled down. Oh, look, this guy seems to be smiling. He's having a grand old time. The Titanic went down. I told those fools there's no such thing as an unsinkable ship. Well, what's really going on here? I mean, that's what this image is attributed to. I don't wonder if it's a mistake, maybe. Not that historians ever make intentional mistakes, but it can happen. It's really, really odd. But yeah, in the archive, that's what this image is attributed to. From the hotel, the U.S. Senate committee hearing on the Titanic sinking. Why are they doing that in the Waldorf Astoria? Oh, because it was John Jacob Astor. Silly me. Okay, I'll stop. But then, again, looking at the restaurant. And yeah, I mean, just imagine eating in a restaurant like this. Just impressive and amazing. And here the street view image of it once the hotels were joined into one. And again, you can see some of the decorations on the outside of it. So it wasn't enough that they made the inside so impressive and opulent, they had to do it on the outside as well. Look, when you go into this place, you know you're going in a palace. I would argue that once again, this is something else that rivals any of the great palaces that still stand in Europe to this day. But, this is the United States. We tore it down for whatever reason. Yeah, it's very, very intriguing. Well, we know the reason. They tell us it was so they could build an impressive skyscraper. But you look at some of these other structures and some of these other images, and it's very, very peculiar. Especially with the coloring on it. I mean, what's exactly going on with this bank right here? Again, all this odd symbolism. Now, is this a bank? I don't even know. I think it's a bank. Maybe not. Maybe it's something else. It's just what we typically associate with a bank. But very, very odd. I mean, these images that really show us that there seems to be a completely different world than we'd expect to see in our mainstream historical account. So, thoughts on that one so far? Yeah, there you go, Heidi. She says it very, very directly. They were getting rid of evidence. And that seems to be exactly what they were doing. Getting rid of evidence, and that was that. All right, I still got a little bit of energy before we go on our break. Let's take a look at the Willard Intercontinental in Washington. And this has another very interesting story behind it as well. Now, I debated on whether or not to include this one, but I thought, couldn't not include this one because this one's actually been in a lot of different how should we say, films and things that were attributed from Washington, D.C. So, yes, we're going to the capital of the United States. And this is it, the Willard Intercontinental in Washington. Now, let me make sure you can see this image and make sure the sound is working okay because there's been issues. There we go, we're good. So, once again, they say that this was originally a structure built in the 1850s. It was augmented over time. And then again, in the early 1900s, they built this incredible Beaux Arts beauty that you see in front of you now because, well, why wouldn't they? And the very peculiar thing when they say Beaux Arts is, it's kind of like saying Gilded Age. We don't really have another term for it, so this is what we're going to go with. And yes, Washington, D.C., you've got everything. You've got columns, you've got some interesting construction material. By the way, this one is still standing. You can still visit it to this day. And you've got this little dome here and all these portal windows. So a very, very impressive structure. Hosted many presidents over time. Let's take a look at some of the interiors. And oddly enough, this is one that has survived, for the most part, unscathed to this day. Now, there's been renovations. There's been changes over the years. But you can still go to the Willard Intercontinental in Washington, D.C., and you can still get a pretty good idea of what the old world was on the interior. You can get an idea of what the interiors must have looked like in Atlantic City in the hotels that we lost there. Now, as beautiful and as amazing as the Willard Intercontinental Washington was, wait a minute. That deserves a Billy Drago adjective of beautiful. Very beautiful building. Very beautiful. You ever hear Billy Drago say beautiful? It's very distinct how he says it. My favorite line, though, is when he says it to Chuck Norris. Yeah, if anybody could tell off Chuck Norris, it was Billy Drago. Anyways, you look, though, at some of the details that still survive in the building, and I think you can get a good idea of what the construction detailings were that we missed out on the other structures, because here you see it. Gold. It looks like gold. Well, it's actually just brass. You can see it in the columns. Marble, granite, some more advanced construction material. You can see it even here in this little portal window decoration, this little motif going around it. It's everywhere. So again, a hotel, that's a palace. Now, the official account will be, well, that's because this is to host presidents and international delegations and for the United States to show its opulence. Yeah, okay, sure. We can just accept that. But amazing that a lot of this actually looked like this at one point in time. They say that this hotel had dilapidated a lot by the 1970s, but they decided to restore it. Now, is that really what happened? Or is this just something that we're informed happened? Because again, this is another one of these really, well, dare I say, schlocky images. And so it becomes hard to tell exactly what happened. You look at the older images from the 1920s, 1930s. And again, it gives you the idea that the structure is a heck of a lot older than we might like to believe. Now, again, maybe you could just say it's just because everything was so dirty. I mean, there wasn't a Dust Bowl in Washington, D.C. in the 20s or 30s, but it's very, very odd. And even in the 70s when they renovated it, you can still find that this was actually the way the interior looked. Just a beautiful palace on the inside of it. So, anyway, I just wanted to recover those images just to really show you the comparison. So they do tell us that this building was dilapidated and falling apart in the 70s, but they renovated it to this. And I just wanted to emphasize that because I do think it's important. Yeah, as Dallas says, art can be a powerful tool to sway people. The presence of art or the lack of art, both of those concepts can work very, very well. But I thought it's important to highlight that. So anyway, back to where we started. Now, this is an office building that they built right across the way. This is imitation, if you will, because this doesn't match the Willard Intercontinental. But they wanted this office building to blend in with it. They built it in the 1980s. But you look closely, you can see, yeah, there's no comparison. Where's the beautiful decorative detailing? Where are the cool spires? Where's the geometric precision? It's just not there. A for effort or 2 Picard barks for trying. But, it just, it doesn't suit the bill. Especially when you look at a better image of it. Yeah. Nice try, but, almost looks a little too industrial looking. But, I'll give them credit for trying to match the aesthetic, but you can just see that there's no way that in the 1980s they could build something that we could build in 1909 for various reasons. And then, of course, you look at the real McCoy, the genuine article, and you can see it in the construction material, in the way that the decorations on the portal windows look. They've got that shell motif. We don't have the shell motif, or whatever you want to call it, on the I'm not going to say anything bad about it, but on the attempt to replicate it in the 80s in the office building. So all very, very interesting, something that really stands out. But then you go here and, oh, yeah, it's a popular wedding venue. Again, another sign that it's a true old world building. And again, you can see all the detailing here. I mean, what do these symbols mean? And are these symbols that we associate with the United States? Yeah, it's as American as Egyptian, Greek, and every other thing that we just seem to take in place. Well, America's a composition of all cultures. Yeah, sure. You can say that any day of the week if you want to. But yet you see something that matches any of the finest palaces in Europe in a hotel in Washington, D.C. And yet the other true sign that you're in an old world structure is, remember how the appearance, the coloring changes depending on the lighting. Now, usually I point that out in exterior formats, but here I wanted to point this out in an interior, because you can really see it in this structure, that the rooms, the construction material, look different in different lighting. Now, of course, you're saying, well, anything will look different in different lighting. Yes, true. But yet, for whatever reason, it's much more prominent. There's much more of that color palette in the old world structures. For example, why is it in our modern movies we seem to favor this blue muted tone all the time? Yeah, we've got 4K, but you're going to see it in a very dark, almost blue muted tone. I can go back and watch classic Star Trek, and I see more colors in that, even with all the limitations they had in the 1960s. And this was the original Willard Hotel from the 1850s with the Franklin Pierce inauguration, and here in this lovely sketch that proved that it happened. So thoughts on this little doozy here? Yeah, there you go, Sean. I hate filters in movies and lens flare. Yeah, lens flare. I wasn't going to mention that, but since you brought it up, yeah. It's as though they're trying to conceal what you can actually see, even though we've got this incredibly ultra-high definition of whatever we're calling it this day or that day. So, again, not really sure what to make of it. All right. So, let's take a look at the one that you can still go see and visit to this day. We're going to Los Angeles, the Millennium Biltmore in Los Angeles. And this is really something to behold. And I think I'm just going to power right on through this. Why not? Now, the Biltmore is another one of those structures that can throw you for a loop. And the reason being is that on the exterior, it doesn't look that impressive initially. You'll probably be saying, okay, Aurelian, why are you making a big deal about this one? It just kind of looks like, one of those office buildings. There's nothing that impressive about it, unless you're actually in Los Angeles and you've stayed in this place. Now, this is from 1922 when they built it. Originally, it had over, 1,400 rooms? Quite a few rooms. Now it has half that capacity. So again, make of it what you will. But looking a little bit more closer at this structure, and you can see that the entryway, there is a lot of detailing. Ah, yes, our finest work from the 1920s. And again, yes, Cirrus, just what we associate with Los Angeles in the 1920s, right? Our pantheon of Greek and Roman deities, because, we're all about that in Los Angeles in the 1920s, apparently. So this is just the entryway, and already you can see there's a lot more to this structure than meets the eye. But then here in the main court at the Biltmore, you can see that the true elements of the old world still exist in this structure, right here. Now, I've got some better images, just bear with me, but you've got a fountain here, and very interesting acoustics. You also have some very interesting images here. I mean, what the heck is this supposed to represent? Oddly enough, this kind of reminds me of that amalgamated creature that we saw by Roberts High School, and that we've seen in many other places, and astrology notwithstanding. Very, very interesting. And yet, when you stay in this hotel, there's all kinds of interesting details like this. And yet you can even see it in many of the galleries and how it's still decorated. And like I said, this is a hotel where the old world has been completely preserved for whatever reason. Is it because it's in Los Angeles? I'm not really sure. Ah, yeah, Sean. Angel with Naga-like serpent features. And that seems to be a theme. Very, very odd. Oh, Griff had a good one there. Let me get that one up. Starbucks siren. Yeah, maybe. Maybe, for all we know. And Julia had a good one there. Atom Bomb, built less. Yeah, no doubt. Want to try to get to some of the comments because you got some great ones here. But anyway, Everywhere you look within the interior of this hotel, it's just impressive. It's incredible. You can go stay at this hotel to this day and you can see all this. You can interface with all this. This survives for whatever reason. The Biltmore survives, and it's in all of its incredible beauty. It has all the decorations and all the materials intact. On the outside, it may not look that impressive, but on the inside, it's all there. All of the decorations are preserved. It's as though, for whatever reason, look, there's the shell motif, a giant one, and yet other odd details. Always in the ceiling. All this effort in 1922 in Los Angeles. Does this make any sense? Even in this painting here. Look at what we could do back then. Very, very impressive. Hold on, I went the wrong way with the images, so just give me a second. So anyway, back to the base image. Yep, doesn't look that impressive. Let me go the other way. They say that this hotel is haunted. Of course, they do with any old world building. It's been subject to a couple of those ghost hunts, if you will. I don't know what to make of it. Maybe there's an energy with the building or something else, or, maybe it's just something in our minds. But like even here with the piano, look at the ceiling and how it's decorated. And what exactly is this figure right here? A mask with a wreath? Laurel wreath, maybe? And I mean, everywhere you go in this hotel, you can find all sorts of symbols to look at and analyze. I mean, you could just spend an entire day or an entire week. And I'm not going to say that I spent an entire week just looking at this hotel. I did spend an inordinate amount of time. And you'll find just interesting things all over the place. In the strangest of places. Anywhere you want to look. Like even this figure over here. Very, very strange. Not to say it doesn't look human, but there is something a little off about it. And to say nothing about our little angel serpentine creature that we saw. But I mean, look at this. You might think this is some sort of zodiac, but is this some sort of more advanced zodiac here? Is this representing something else? I mean, I've never really seen figures or artwork like this, and yet, right in the middle here, our favorite cartouche. Decorated in the same way, and yet this is probably one of the most ornate and opulent ones that I've seen that have survived. Several cartouches. And so really here in this hotel, this Millennium Biltmore, you can get an idea for what the old world really looked like at its ascendancy. And then you can compare and contrast with the black and white photos that we have of it, and you can see how much of the coloring and the detailing is lost. If you were to stay in the Millennium Biltmore to this day and compare and contrast it with the old photos, that's where it gets very, very interesting. So not really sure what to make of all that. Adam, I imagine haunted is residual vibrations of the creatures that built more of these structures. You're probably right. Got to be some sort of explanation for it. Let's see if we've got any more good images from the interior. Yes, here's that ballroom today. And of course, it's a wedding venue, because why wouldn't it be? But look at this in the background here. I mean, just incredible detailing all the way up to the ceiling and connecting the pillars and the columns, each of the doorways. Like I said, you could just spend days and days, weeks and weeks analyzing every symbol, every bit of material, just looking at it. You don't even have to touch, but, a lot of places you can touch and ascertain the construction material. And it all seems to be standing up very nicely, very, very well to this day. So quite incredible. And many things that just we really can't explain. I mean, I guess you could say this is your classic Zodiac, but this feels very original in and of itself. But everywhere you go in the Millennium Biltmore, all the way to the entryway, you'll see it looking straight up. I mean, just construction and detailing for a hotel. Yes, always a hotel. So anyway, the LA Biltmore, Millennium Biltmore, go stay there today. It's still somewhat cost effective. There's only 600 rooms. You don't have 1,200. Don't ask me why they decreased the number of rooms, but that's why we got. So before taking off, I wanted to take a look at some other, I won't say honorable mentions, because really any of these hotels are just incredible. But I thought we'd take a look at some others real quick. And you may recall this one. This is something else I remember John Levi covering briefly. This is in Indiana, in West Baden Springs Hotel near French Lick, Indiana. Not exactly the place that we'd expect to see an opulent hotel, at least not from the very start of the 1900s. I mean, somebody might say, hey, isn't Larry Bird the NBA player and famous coach from French Lick? Did he bring a lot of money in there? Yeah, but he didn't come along until the 1970s, 1980s, so you can't attribute this to Larry Bird. So anyway, the largest dome in the land and some really schlocky pictures of it. And yet you compare and contrast it with things like the Codex Gigas. I don't know what that's doing in there, but I'll get to that in a second. But there's very limited imagery of this. And yet this very large, very impressive compound that was in Indiana, a gigantic domed building, complete with dome bell towers all around it, or subsidiary bell towers. Doesn't really make a lot of sense. You know, we got the old postcards on it. Very, very strange. And yet, when you look at this image, and this will be the final image right here, you can see that it seems to have been a great compound of some sort. Now, was there more to this compound? I mean, I know that this is just a drawing or a painting or whatever you want to call it, but yet when you look in the details, you can see that there are many ancillary buildings. We have a giant smokestack, apparently of some sort here. You get the idea that this is actually a gigantic compound, that it wasn't just the central building. I mean, look how it's all connected. And so I have to ask that question, was this particular hotel a reset compound of sorts? I mean, how does it actually make any sense? KC933, definitely flammable. Well, it was renovated over the years, so Atom Bomb Basketball College, yeah, maybe. You know, it's really, really interesting. Yeah, Ubu Khan says it very well here. Self-sustaining community. That's what it feels like. Just like the asylums and many other isolated structures. Hey, New West Reset, good to see you. Raised pedways with onion domes. Yeah, why not? You know, you got to survive all those difficulties that come out there, so make the most of it. Yeah, Opie, maybe it was once a resort and then it got repurposed into something. I mean, it did survive whatever calamities occurred, so hard to really say. So there's that. This is what the dome looks like today, and you can still see they've got the giant columns that are amalgamated into the walls, and I mean, it looks like it's been renovated, but maybe there was something even more impressive up there if we go back to that little apparatus that we saw looking at the earlier hotels. So what to make of it, I don't know. And then just last but not least, just a look back at the Intercontinental in Chicago. We looked at this in the Chicago exploration. And yet these odd symbols that don't really make a lot of sense, these guardian figures that are amalgamated in the walls. So yes, apparently we had the resources to do that in hotels all the time back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this exploration. Before you depart, please be sure you hit the like button, and appreciate everybody supporting the channel and being here. And hopefully you enjoyed this exploration, this little look at these hotels.